Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be going over my reading plans for the month of November, and I don't know if it's as crazy for you as it is for me, but realizing that we are already about to go into the month of November is just mind-blowing for me. The fact that we are really in the home stretch of 2024 is just crazy to me that we will be in 2025. But with that quick aside, let's go ahead and talk about what I'm actually going to be reading. And the first thing I want to mention is something that I might be carrying over from the month of October. I plan on being finished with it by the time the month is over, but that would be The Phoenix Keeper. This is my first romantasy. So this is kind of pitched as a magical zoo with a romance in it. I haven't started it just yet. I should be starting it tomorrow as I'm filming this, but this is one that hopefully I will actually, get it finished in October. But this is kind of my first foray into a real romantasy. I kind of want to see what that genre is all about, and I didn't want to go with one of the big names like the Sarah J. Maas books that I can't remember off the top of my head, or the other one that's super popular, Fifth Wing. There we go. It took me a second to remember it. I didn't want to start there because those are like the big hyped ones, but this was a new release, and the idea of a magical zoo I thought was an interesting enough premise that maybe there's enough of that part of the book that the romance isn't like overpowering, and there's still something interesting there for me to explore. So we'll see if that happens or not, and hopefully I do finish it, like I said, in the month of October. But then let's go ahead and talk about some new stuff for me. And technically, the first one up is a little bit of a cheat because this was originally on my TBR for the month of October as well, but there's just no way I will get to this one as well, mostly because the Forgetting Moon took me a little bit longer to finish in October than I originally thought. But the book I'm talking about is The Last Murder at the End of the World. I find the premise of this book to be pretty interesting because there's nothing. It takes place on an island, and there's nothing outside of the island. Basically, we are in a world-ending situation, but there's a murder, and it's a mystery, and we got to figure out what's happened. In general, I like a good mystery thriller thrown into my reading every now and again. I think the setting of this kind of gives it that extra element of like, man, we're already probably in limited resources, limited number of people, and somebody murdered somebody. Like, is there going to be some kind of like weird tension going on? Is it going to be a love triangle kind of thing? I don't know. I'm just kind of curious about that one, and so that will definitely be one that I get to here in the month of November. But let's talk about the big one for November. So this actually released in the October here at the end of the month, and that is The Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is really going to be my headliner book for this month. This is the third and final book of the Bloodsworn saga, and it is a book that I am immensely excited for. One of my most anticipated books of the year and everything. And as usual, I have stayed away from watching any reviews or anything because there have been people who either had arcs or who have already kind of blitzed through it and finished it already. The one thing that I have heard makes me both excited and slightly nervous for it. I have heard that there is a lot of action in this book. And on the one hand, I think John Gwynne might be the best action writer I have ever read. And on the other hand, sometimes too much action is too much. Like, it's like, how much of a good thing can you have? Personally, I think I'm going to really enjoy this book. I don't think that's going to be a problem with me. I think the way this series has led up, that all of these battles and everything that are going to come together and just be this big epic Norse mythology kind of ending to a great series. And I do want to point out that there should be a recap for this book, and that is something I just want to props to John Gwynne. He knows that not everybody has time to go back and reread the series every time a book comes out. And so I know at The Hunger of the Gods, which is book 2, there was a quick, I don't even know if it was 5 pages, but a recap of the big important things that you need to kind of have in mind as you go into the book from book 1. And I'm pretty sure there will be one of these again here for book 3. And I just, big props off. If you are an author and you are not just giving a quick, hey, these are the big things that you need to remember if it's been a while in your book. And I know for some books it's probably easier and harder and all of that, but I think you owe it to your readers, and I think it makes your books a lot more readable. This is a complete side tangent, but I really think that not doing that puts you in a disadvantage, because there are going to be people who don't pick up your book because they don't want to go back and reread things. But if you just give them, from the author, a good synopsis of what's happening and how to frame everything again for them, I just feel like that's a huge positive. And so anytime an author does that, and I know John Gwynne does, huge shout out, and I just want to point out how nice that is for me as a reader. So a little while back, I made a video about Stephen King books that I still need to read or I want to read, and I kind of asked for suggestions on some of the ones that I should read and when I should read them and stuff. And one that came up is that I should definitely read The Shining as the season changes and kind of got towards winter, and so I'm going to read The Shining this month. This is a movie that I think everybody's really familiar with Jack Nicholson and the Here's Johnny and all that kind of stuff, but I am very interested to read the book. I think there is a very big tonal difference between the movie and the book, and I know that in retrospect, Stephen King didn't like the movie. He had a lot of problems with it. And so I'm very interested to see how I think they compare, because like I said, I do really like the movie. I think it's one of those classics that holds up really well, and I do find find all of like the moon landing conspiracy stuff to be really fun to look at. Not that I think the moon landing was fake, but I do think it's funny that like people point to like the kids' pajamas and all of those kinds of things that happen in the movie as like Stanley Kubrick saying he faked the moon landing for the US government. It's just one of those fun, out there theories. But the book itself, I don't really know what to expect because I don't know like how tonally different or if there's like big plot points that are completely different throughout the book. And so I'm looking forward to getting to it. King has been such a revelation for me this year. I have immensely enjoyed everything I've read from King. Like even my least favorite thing that I've read from him is better than most things I have read. So very much looking forward to getting back to King. He currently has my favorite book of the year, so going back to him as an author, I just feel like is going to be a great time. And then the next two reads that I have planned are actually one is a novella, and I think one is technically a short story, so let's go ahead. The short story is going to be The Last Question, and this is by Isaac Asimov. I recently just made like a video about authors that I haven't read yet and that I really need to. Asimov was one of them, and I talked about the Foundation series in that, and I had somebody in the comments tell me about this really short story from him and that would be a good one to maybe start with some of his writing. Apparently he can be very dry. Normally that's not a problem for me, but this is like an hour-long audiobook, and so it's really hard to complain about any time sink into something that is that short. The basic premise of this, I think, has to do with the last question, which is like what happens as the universe ages, or not the universe as the universe ages, like what is the last thing that happens? I think it kind of explores maybe some ideas or an idea about what happens as the universe, there's all kinds of theories about like the great, what is it, the shrinkage, like a rubber banding thing. I don't know. There's a bunch of different theories about what actually happens as the universe continually expands, or does it all come back together to another a single point and have another big bang, all kinds of things. And I'll be curious to see what somebody in that sphere at that time was thinking about with the end of the universe. And I think this will be a fun, very short read. Like I said, I think it's an hour-long audiobook. And then the other one is the novella that is taking place in the Captive War series. That is the book written by James S.A. Corey, the first one being The Mercy of Gods. This novella is called Live Suit. I don't know anything about it other than it takes place in that series. I am one of the people who's more positive on that series. I actually really had a good time with Mercy of the Gods. And it's one of those books that the more I sit with and think about, the more I enjoy and the more I like about it. And I think a lot of people had a problem going into it expecting The Expanse, but just different. And it is not The Expanse. It is very different. I think the motives around writing it and how the story is being told is completely different from The Expanse, and it's something that works for me. I know a lot of people wanted like a little bit better character development and deeper characters and be able to connect with that, but that's not necessarily something that I struggle with in the same way as other people. So that was a book that really worked for me. And just like The Expanse, they are throwing in these like novellas that you don't have to read, but it definitely enriches the story. Like if you plan on reading The Expanse, or you have read The Expanse and you haven't read all the novellas, you definitely should. There's a lot added in, some of them definitely more than others, but I think they are definitely, important to read in those universes. And then, as always, because I am a mood reader, I always throw these in here at the end. These are some maybes if I have time, if something really speaks to me at some point in the month. These are some books that I might end up throwing in here, either maybe in place of something or just because I want to read them. The first one, this has been mentioned pretty much every single time, and at some point I just really need to make an effort into reading Starship Troopers. This is a book that I think I say this every time. I want to watch the movie, I want to read the book first. It's one of those classic, it's from an author I haven't read yet, and I really just need to get around to reading it at some point. I think it's just one of those ones that like I want to read it and just haven't put any effort into it, and so it needs to happen at some point. Another one is Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin. I want to read something outside of A Song of Ice and Fire, which technically I did. The Ice Dragon doesn't take place in that world, but that's a very, very short story from him, and this is a novel from him. I believe it has a vampire story and vampires in it, so it's a story I want to get to at some point. I want to experience more of George's writing outside of that. And then another book is this Darien Empire of Salt. Ben from Books with Genghis Khan has been a champion for this series. He really wants as many people as possible to read it, and I want to read it at some point. I think this whole trilogy is shorter than The Forgetting Moon, so it's a very short series that I could probably get through really quickly if I dedicated some time to it. Another one that maybe I will try to get to is To Ride Hell's Chasm by Janie Wirtz. I have read a decent amount of Janie Wirtz at this point. I'm 3 books into The Wars of Light and Shadow. I've read The Master of White Storm. I want to read this. She has one other standalone, and she has another trilogy that it's all just by her. I know she also has the books with Raymond E. Feist that I have not read yet either. But as far as just standalone Janny Wirt's work, I also read The Gallant. That's a short story that takes place inside of the Wars of Light and Shadow as well. So she's an author I really like, really enjoy all parts of her writing. And so she's one that is always kind of on the radar. Like maybe this is the perfect time to pick up one of her books. And then the last one I think I'm going to go ahead and mention here is The Blackest Heart. So if you watched my video about The Forgetting Moon is one of my favorite books I've ever read. It's one of the best fantasy books I've ever read. And I desperately want to get to The Blackest Heart, but I also don't want to just try to like cram it in and not like get to enjoy it the way I want to. So I don't know exactly when I'm going to get to it. Looking ahead a little bit, I think it's probably going to be 2025 before I get to The Blackest Heart, but I am dying to get to it. I want to get to it sooner than later, and I really want to finish the Five Warrior Angels trilogy. I've heard that the next two books are better than The Forgetting Moon, or most people like them more, and like I said, The Forgetting Moon is one of my favorite fantasy books I've ever read. So if it only gets better from there, I really, really want to get to that. But we'll have to see if this month shakes out well for me. Some of it will just depend on how much reading I get done and all of that fun stuff. But do let me know what you plan on reading in the month of November down below in the comments. But that's all for me. And as always, have a good one.